Hello, I just wanted to summarize what we had covered in our meeting this afternoon. So about five of us were, or six of us were there, but I just wanted to make a quick summary of the video, or of what we discussed in a video for those of you who weren't here. Okay, so first of all, a couple of weeks ago when we started this project, we were all sort of expecting a second wave in New Jersey. And as things have opened up, we were expecting to start to see things turn around, but that just does not seem to be happening. So it seems like things are getting better in New Jersey, but they're getting worse in other parts of the country. So one of the things we did was we looked at the data from around the country. So let me share a screen with you. Okay, so in this screen, we can actually see these are the cases in each state. They're now scaled proportionally. It's an adjusted scale, so every state maxes out at the same height. Whereas if I use a uniform scale, you can see certain states that have low populations really have a pretty flattened line, and you can't really see the data all of that well. And then other states like New York swamp the rest of the scale. But in this scale, we can see some things. Let's first of all look at New York, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. You can see that the number of cases just keeps dropping. And that's with better and better testing. So as we're testing more, yet the cases are dropping. So that's a very good thing because we have been opening up the state. We've been having protests, and yet the numbers keep dropping. Connecticut looks the same way. Rhode Island, Pennsylvania look the same way. Virginia, Maryland, Delaware looks like that's what's happening. And even into the Midwest, Ohio, not dropping so much. Looks like maybe there's a little uptick here. But Michigan, Illinois, they all look good. So some of these Midwest states don't look great. If we continue down, notice these graphs are kind of in the shape of a US map. So it's kind of nice. You can see California looks like it's a disaster right now. It's going up and up and up. And Arizona, even though it has a very low population, the number of cases, because remember now this is a absolute scale, so all cases count the same. So Arizona has a huge number of cases for a state with not as large of a population as states like California. Texas is shooting up. Florida is shooting up. So we can see these, there are states kind of around the west and south of the country that are bad. And if we do the adjusted scale, we can see it's an even worse picture for the south and the west. We can see just about everything in the west has an upward trend right about now. Colorado is a bit of an exception. It's actually coming down. And Kansas doesn't have that many cases overall, but Oklahoma, Texas, okay, Alabama and Georgia, the Carolinas, they're all bad. So the South looks bad and the West looks bad. Louisiana got hit early, like New Jersey and New York, because of Mardi Gras. So they're actually sort of down at this lower level now. So they're one of the few southern states that's faring better now than they had early on. So for most southern states, it's actually, we see an increase in cases, a pretty drastic increase in some of those cases. So this data, I put it into a table, and I looked at, I put the trend in this last column, okay? But what I wanted to compare it to was the number of deaths that had happened in the state versus the population of the state. So I came up with a percentage of deaths, okay? And notice this is about New Jersey is the worst state. We've had about 0.145% die. But it seems like our data is leveling off. So remember, in the best of the three models that I gave you, I assumed that the death rate might be 0.25%. It looks like maybe that is an asymptote somewhere around there. Maybe it's a little lower, maybe it's about 0.2%. And that would be even better. But if we have that sort of maximum number or maximum percentage that might die from the virus, it looks like it would explain why we're kind of leveling off. And then you can see as we go down, the other states that have high percentages, relatively close to that of New Jersey, are all in good shape. They tend to be in the Mid-Atlantic and New England region. And if we keep going down the list and look at others that are relatively high, but not as high as that first set, we can see that almost all of those are in good shape as well. Louisiana is the one little outlier here. It's a Southeast region state. All of the others are New England, Mid-Atlantic, and a little bit in the Midwest. So the northeast corner of the map has gone through the most cases so far, and has had the most deaths, but it seems to be doing much better now. When you get out of there into these lower percentages further down in the list, states like Texas had an extremely low percentage of deaths so far. They've only had 2,000 as opposed to 12,000 in New Jersey. Actually, we're approaching 13,000, and their population is about 3 times as large. So they have about a sixth as many deaths for a population that's 3 times as large. So their percentage of deaths is very low. And right now, their numbers are going up rapidly. So many of the states that didn't have to contend with the coronavirus seriously at the beginning, they are contending with it now. So with that in mind, let me switch over to MATLAB quickly and show you what happens in our model. Let me share my MATLAB screen. Okay, so here we are back in MATLAB. Okay, and if we look at what's going to happen with the infections, we can see when we run the data with the numbers that we had, we can see that things really just continue to drop off over time. Okay, so even if we continue to loosen up our restrictions, the number of infections is kind of in this region of the graph right now where things are fairly level, and it should drop off even further. Now, there's a little bit of a problem with our data. Oops, close that for now. When we had matched the data, or I'm sorry, our model to the data for deaths in New Jersey, we had a threshold of about 0.07 and a slope of about 3%. So that was 7%, and 3% over 52 was the growth in the hospital threshold curve. Okay, so our curve looked something like that. And in the video that I showed you, we saw that we had a problem. We went over the top. So my suggestion, because we clearly didn't crash our hospitals, was to raise the threshold and raise the rate at which it was growing so that the line looks more like this. Okay. Now there's a problem. Once I do that, if I go back to the data for deaths, whoops, and I need to make my Y value much smaller so I can actually see it. 0.008, I think is a good number to use. Let me just go out to about 28 weeks. Let me make Y go even smaller, 0.002. Let's try that. We can see that the model, the black line for the number of deaths that should occur, doesn't match the data that well anymore. Okay, and the reason why is because we were matching the data assuming that a much larger percentage of people were dying because the hospitals had become overcrowded. We didn't have enough beds for everyone who needed a bed. We would probably ran out of ventilators. So once we raised the hospital threshold, which we know it had to be higher than this, then we wouldn't see that many deaths, so the black line doesn't go up to the actual number of deaths that we had. So what I'm challenging you to do is to go back to the matrix of A values up to 21 weeks and play with the numbers, probably starting around 13 weeks or so. You could start as early as 12 weeks. Play with the numbers and try to get the curve to fit, the black curve to fit the magenta data points as well as you can, right? And if you get a really good match, send me those A values that worked. You can just cut and paste them into an email. So you can just copy them all out and stick them in an email and let me see how well you did with that. or you could take a screenshot of your graph and give me a little picture of that. And I went back and rematched the data and got some pretty good results, but maybe you can do even better than I did. A final challenge, a question that had been asked at the end of the meeting was, what would happen if we just completely opened up now? So what I suggest is, starting around week 22, just make this number a 4, or maybe hold off, maybe make it a 4. We're probably getting close to week 26. So we're probably about week 24 right now. So maybe starting at the end of June, you could make, that would be week 26. You could raise that to a 4 and see what happens to the data when we do that. Okay, so right now we have a bad match. We just have to tweak the numbers a little bit to make it realistic again and get our model to work. So we're very close to having a working model. And fortunately, it appears that the percentage of deaths will be more like 1/4% rather than 1%. That's still going to be a lot of people. And every life does matter. But we want to, it's much better picture than what we had before. And we probably won't see a large second wave if this model is in fact true. So remember, we're assuming that everyone who has been exposed becomes immune. And so with that in mind,